So today my drill is going to be on the department radio, the Motorola APX 8000HXE multiband radio. The purpose of this radio is that it provides us interoperability, which means that we can communicate within our department as well as with other departments and agencies. So who carries this radio? All firefighting members carry this radio, and it's assigned to every firefighting position. How it shall be carried is within the radio pocket of the turnout coat with the RSM attached to the clip, as well as on EMS incidents or non-emergency incidents. You can also carry it in the approved belt clip on the work uniform. So now we'll go over the specifications of the radio. So firstly, this is a 3,000 channel capacity radio, and it currently has 80 zones as of 2023. It's also a multiband radio, so it has 4 bands in one. It has 700 to 800 megahertz capabilities, as well as ultra high frequency and very high frequency, or UHF, VHF. What LAFD uses is the 700 to 800 megahertz, which transmits at 3 watts. What other departments like Pasadena and Burbank use is going to be that UHF, or ultra high frequency, and that transmits at 4 watts. And then we have our very high frequency, or VHF, which departments like LA County and the Forestry Service use, and that transmits at 5 watts. Next, we're just going to talk about the dimensions a little bit. So this radio is 3.3 inches wide, approximately 7.7 inches long without the antenna, and it weighs about 1.7 pounds. It's also a ruggedized model, which means that it can withstand very high temperatures, very low temperatures, as well as temperatures or environments with high pressures. It's shock resistant, so when you drop it, it's not going to break. It also is fully submergible within 6.5 feet of liquid for up to 4 minutes. And then it is also what we call HAZLOC certified, or intrinsically safe, which means that the battery that is attached to it emits low enough energy so that it will not create a spark and ignite in environments with an explosion risk. As long as you don't change out the battery in that environment, this radio will stay intrinsically safe. In addition to that, it has GPS, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth capabilities. So now that we've covered all of the specifications of the radio, we'll now go over the different components and the buttons of the radio. So we'll start with the top here. Here you'll see our volume control knob and power control knob. So as soon as I turn this, the radio will turn on, and it will go through a self-test. Once it completes its self-test, it will either go to the channel that has been selected, or it'll show you an error code if there is an issue with the radio. What you're meant to do if that error code shows up is switch out the battery to determine if the battery is faulty. If it still shows that error code when it goes through the self-test, then you are meant to go through the replacement procedures for this radio, which we'll talk about at the end of the drill. So that is the volume control knob. You can titrate the volume by turning it to the right to make it louder. Next, we have our 16 channel selector knob, which goes from channels 1 to 16. And then we also have our keypad lock switch. So we have ABC, A and B are keypad unlocked, C is keypad locked, which means the keypad and the controls you will not be able to use, and that's to avoid any unwanted pressing of buttons while you're moving around on an incident or within your pockets. Next, we have our 2-position concentric switch, which is disabled on LAFD radios. And then we have our LCD display, which you can actually flip the presentation of the LCD display by pressing this purple button here, which we'll also talk about. And then we have our LED indicator light, which tells us when we're transmitting, when we're receiving a transmission, either from the scan list or from our main channels. It also tells us the battery condition as well. And then we have our EAB, or emergency alert button, which we would press in a Mayday situation, which we'll go over later in the drill as well. And then we have our antenna. So the way that we identify it's the proper antenna to use with this radio is it has a V, U, and then 7 to 8 GPS capabilities. So it's compatible with this radio. Normally this antenna will not have purple tape on it, but since this is a drill tower radio, the antenna is protected so that the drill tower communications don't get mixed up with the communications in the field. So that covers all of the top components. Now we'll move along to the side components. So we have this purple button here, and what that does, it lights up the LCD display, and it also, if you hold it down and press it, it will switch the presentation of that display so that you can easily read it better in your pocket, no matter which way it's pointing. So that's that button. Then we have our PTT, or push to talk button, which is recessed so that you don't have any unwanted transmissions coming out. And then we have our direct and repeat button. So now that we're on the direct and repeat button, we can talk a little bit about the differences between going direct and going to repeat mode. So we have 9 repeat sites throughout the city, as well as 1 repeater site that is a backup on Mount Lukens. As well as multi-bidirectional amplifiers throughout the city as well. And basically what being in repeat mode does is that this radio has the capabilities of transmitting through longer distances to, for example, all the way from San Pedro, my message can reach Metro all the way in downtown by hitting those repeater sites, and then those repeaters, they transmit that transmission to the next repeater site and to other radios and so on. So it allows you to reach further distances and get your message out basically to everyone that you want to, no matter the distance. But going direct mode would allow you to bypass that repeater and connect directly from one radio to the next radio within the line of sight. So you want to use direct mode when you're in, for example, confined spaces, such as an elevator or within a high rise, underground for like metro incidents, as well as anytime you're in really enclosed spaces where the transmission is going to have a hard time getting out of that space. So anytime where you're in repeat mode and you're not being acknowledged by the person, your transmission is likely not going out and hitting the repeater, so you can try direct mode, and that might work to help get your transmission to the next person or the next radio. So now that we've talked about direct repeat, we can move on with our buttons. This button right here is the monitor button. Basically takes out all the filters that we put in the radio and allows us to hear all the frequencies that are coming in to our radio. On the other side, we have our accessory attachment, which our RSM is attached to. So this is the RSM, or remote speaker mic. We'll start with the cord. So the cord of the RSM is the weakest part of the radio. Every day, as part of your daily checks, you want to check the RSM cord and make sure that there's no wears, tears, frays, or damage to the RSM cord. And then for our RSM, on the front here is our speaker along with our noise canceling microphones to provide optimal noise canceling for our voice. And then we also have flashlight here. It's a strobe light flashlight, which you can depress and hold, and it's actually 14 lumens. And then next, on the top of the RSM, we have our 16-channel rotary selector knob, the same as the one on the top of our physical radio. And then we have our EAB, also the same as the one on the radio, except this one is much more recessed, because a lot of the times we'll be moving around and that thing will accidentally get pressed. So it's recessed to prevent any unwanted triggers. And then we have our 2 lights, our Bluetooth light and our LED indicator light, which corresponds similarly to the LED on the top of the radio. And then we have our volume control switch. So unlike the volume control knob on the radio, this one is a toggle switch. So you can toggle down all the way, and then 4 to 5 clicks up provides you optimal noise canceling and less feedback when you talk over the radio and when you hear over the radio. Next, going down the side, another push to talk button, and then your direct and repeat button. which allows you to toggle between direct and repeat mode. And then on the back here, we have our 360-degree clip with our nickel-plated D-ring. When you clip the radio onto the mic onto the radio, you're supposed to use this D-ring and never clip the RSM onto the antenna because it could seriously damage the antenna. So that's it for the RSM. Now moving on to the back of the radio. So the back of the radio here, we have our speaker, as well as there's also noise canceling microphones on this side of the radio as well. And then we have our battery. So our battery is a 7.4 volt lithium ion impress 2 battery. This battery has 8 to 10 hours of life, and it is rechargeable via our Impress 2 charging systems. So every day you want to start with a new fresh battery that's at 100%, and you put the old one into the Impress 2 charging systems. The Impress 2 charging systems allow us to have the capabilities to recalibrate our batteries and not have to send them out constantly to get serviced or recalibrated. It allows us to just do it at the station and minimal work to be put in, because once you put in that battery, it does a self-test with the battery and calculates its battery life and its service life, and then it can be recalibrated if it determines that it needs to be. With that being said, every day you'll click in your new battery just by depressing those 2 buttons. You want to make sure you hear the actual click, and then also, as I said at the beginning, it's intrinsically safe as long as you don't change the battery within that ideal H. Now that we've talked about the back, we can now move on to the front of the radio. This is the front of our radio. We have our noise canceling microphones at the top, and then we have our LCD display, and then we have our 3 menu select buttons, as well as our home button, which will take us directly to zone 3, channel 7 from anywhere in the radio. And then we have our 4-way navigation selector buttons and our data button, which is disabled for LAFD radios. And then we have our keypad. And then down here we have our radio 4-digit identifier, which we'll talk about more when we talk about Mayday as well. So now that we've gone through the different components, we can now talk about the communication overview for LAFD. First, we'll talk about zones. So what zones are basically groups of channels that are designated for specific department and regional areas. LAFD operates in zone 3 through zone 6. Zone 1 and 2, as well as 70 and 71, are going to be front panel programming zones. What front panel programming zones are, when you go to, for example, a brush incident, you'll bring your radio to that front desk and they'll use those zones to program your radio so that you can operate within different agencies, be able to communicate with different agencies on a big incident such as a brush incident. So those are the front panel programming zones. For LAFD, we operate in zone 3 through zone 6. So the first 3 zones, so that would be zone 3, zone 4, and zone 5, are all very, very similar. The only difference is that first channel on each of those zones are dependent upon what division you are within the LA city. For example, zone 3, LAFD 1, TAC 1 is going to be Division 1, which is basically the Division Talk-Around channel for the Central Bureau. And what we use the Division Talk-Around channels for are, basically the name says it, to talk around, such as when you're on automatic alarms, there's no fire, but you're doing a system reset and you're all the way up on the 16th floor or something, and you're trying to communicate with the person below at the panel. So it could be used for that. It can also be used for staging for large incidents. So that's what they're primarily used for. Next, Zone 4, LAFD 2, is Channel 1. Channel 2, TAC 2, is going to be our Division 2 talk-around channel. So that's going to be for South and for the West Bureau. Zone 5, LAFD 3, is going to be the Division talk-around for the Valley Bureau. So all those, the rest of the channels are going to be the same for each zone, except for that first TAC. So now we'll go through the channels. So TAC 4 is going to be EMS dispatch for the Central, South, and West bureaus. Channel 5 is going to be Metro dispatch for arson, swift water, and brush incidents. And then we have Channel 6, which is our Alert 6 Mayday channel, which is programmed into the 16th position. Then we have Channel 7, which is our fire dispatch for Central, South, and West bureaus. And then we have Channel 8, which is our EMS and fire dispatch for the Valley Bureau. Then we have Channel 9, which is our citywide structure size up channel. Then we have Channel 10, which previously used to be our EMS TAC channel, but now that Channel 11 is no longer being used, we use Channel 10 as our incident command channel. Next, Channel 11, like I said, not being used anymore, but previously used to be our incident command channel. And then TAC 12 through 17 are used for incident TAC channels. So whenever we have an incident such as a structure fire, we will get assigned a tactical channel so that we can talk amongst ourselves without interrupting the whole citywide operations and dispatches. And so typically in the Valley, they'll start with TAC 17, and then below the hill for Central, West, and South bureaus, they'll start with TAC 12 and go up from there in between. Zone 6 has a variety of channels for talk around. For example, 7 Nat 02 Delta is our air operations channel. So we use it for various department needs in Zone 6. Or other zones, include the Foothill Mutual Threat Zone. So that would be the MTZ, and that would be Zone 7. And then we have the Santa Susana Mutual Threat Zone, or MTZ, and that would be Zone 11. We also have Zone 21, which is what LAPD operates in. And I strongly recommend that you look up which division that your station lies in within that LAPD division, so that you can give that in your drill. For example, for my station 66, it's going to be Channel 12, which is the 77th Street Division. And then when you are contacting police, if you were to go over the radio on Zone 21, their call sign is control instead of metro. So you'd say control from top member from truck 66 fire department requesting backup or requesting help from the police department, and they would fill out that assignment. You can also find all of the channels and all of the zones in the quick reference guide, which is oftentimes printed out and held on the apparatus that you're assigned on, and can also be found within the LAFD apps through the portal. So now that we've talked about the communication overview, we can now go over the basic functions of the radio. For our radio, we have zones. So first, the basic functions. So we have our zone that allows us to scroll through and choose the zone that we would want to select. Next, we have our channel button, which allows us to select the channels and scroll through various channels that are on the zone that we are currently on. Zones may have more than 16 channels within, so instead of using our rotary selector knob, we'll be able to scroll all the way down to channels more than 100 even. And then we have our scan button, which toggles the scan on and scan off. Then we have our scan list, which allows us to view which channels are being scanned and select which channels that we want to scan, and then set also a priority scan channel as well. Next, we can press nuisance delete, or NUIS, and basically when you're on scan, you can eliminate any unwanted noise from that channel by pressing nuisance delete, and that will delete that channel from your scan list temporarily. Next, we have our battery information, which will tell you three things: the charge, the remaining capacity, and the estimated charges left. Then we have our BT or Bluetooth option, which allows you to connect to Bluetooth. Currently on the LAFD, we don't have any items that we are connecting and using our Bluetooth for, so we make sure that that status is off every morning. Then we have our location button, which allows us to see the exact coordinates that that the radio is currently at. Then we have our front panel programming, which when you go to brush incidents, it allows you to be able to program that radio for that specific incident with multiple agencies and aid. And then we have cloning zones, which same thing, allows you to clone one radio exactly same as another radio. So now we'll talk about command groups. Command groups are basically zones that are customizable. So how you can customize your zones is by going into zones 72 through 79, which are all command group zones. So basically, when you toggle to that zone, it'll allow you to select different channels and customize that zone so that when you're on a brush fire, for example, or an incident where you have mutual aid, such as like the Forestry Service or LA County or Los Angeles National Forest Service, and then you're also operating with LAFD, in order to prevent you having to switch and go on your physical radio and go through and find all the channels, you can program your radio so that it has a specific zone, so that when you turn the channel knob, it can just toggle through those channels that you have chosen from different zones. So it allows you to do that, and it's a lot easier to toggle through those channels. Next is going to be our Mayday procedures. So for Mayday procedures, Mayday is any time a firefighter is in a life-threatening situation. A firefighter or member is in a life-threatening situation. And that can be either a firefighter down, trapped, lost, or missing. It could also be anytime you have an SCBA malfunction or an air malfunction. And then generally, anytime that you find yourself in a situation where it cannot be corrected within 30 seconds. Do you have to wait 30 seconds? Not necessarily if you know that you can't get out of it, but generally that's what Departmental Bulletin 1115 writes down in their Mayday procedures. You can also call it Mayday for another member, for someone else, if you believe them to be in a life-threatening situation, such as if they were to fall through the roof right in front of you, or if they got lost off the hose line and you lost accountability of them, you can call a Mayday for them as well. And then to go over what to do when you have a Mayday situation. So generally, you want to state who you are, what happened or what's the condition, and then where you are. So if I were to be giving a Mayday, it would sound like this. I would say, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday over the radio on the incident TAC channel. Once I get acknowledgement from the incident commander, which would usually sound like, emergency traffic, everyone clear this channel for a Mayday, member with your Mayday, go. Then I would repeat back my Mayday situation and give them a little bit more information. So it would sound like, Mayday, 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 this is top member from truck 66. I fell through the roof on the Charlie Delta side. I'm trapped and I need help. So that gives them the information, who you are. I'm top from 66. And then what happened. So I fell through the roof. I'm trapped, which could also give them indicators of what to bring when they come in and rescue you. And then where you are. So I fell in on the Charlie Delta side. And that gives them an indication of, okay, where can we start looking for her, and where can the rescue team kind of start out looking so that they can perform the rescue. And then generally, there's 5 different ways that you can put out your Mayday, based upon like, okay, primary, okay, that's my backup plan to put out my Mayday, and then okay, that's my backup to my backup, and then like last resort. So generally the first way you want to put out your Mayday is on the incident TAC channel. The reason why this is because everyone around you who is also on the incident, who is working, can hear that over the TAC channel, because that's what they'll be monitoring, and they are more likely to perform the rescue for you than any assigned RIC team that's outside, for example, waiting to be deployed. So that's the number 1. Number 2 would be putting out your Mayday on the incident TAC channel indirect. So if you can't get your transmission out and you're not being acknowledged by the IC, then you can go on to direct, because your transmission might not be able to hit that repeater. And so you can go into direct, and hopefully your message or your transmission will get out and connect to other radios within that same incident. Your third option is to toggle all the way to alert 6. So this is all the way to the right. For every radio, it's programmed in the 16th position. So when you turn your radio all the way to the right, it'll go to alert 6, and then you can put your Mayday out in that mode. The only thing is, if you are in direct mode, you'll toggle all the way to alert 6, and you'll still be in direct mode. So it'll allow you to try indirect, and then also to come out and be in repeat, and then you can try it that way as well. So that's your 4th option. Your 5th and final option, if you cannot get out your Mayday and you're not being acknowledged by anyone on the incident or any IC, is to push your emergency alert button, which is your red button at the top of the radio and at the top of the RSM. Once you depress that for at least 2 seconds, a package of information will be sent to Metro Fire Communications, and that includes the location of your radio, as well as your 4-digit identifier, as well as the position that your radio is assigned to. And so that gives Metro the information that they need in order to communicate with that IC directly and let them know you have a member who's trying to put out a Mayday on your incident. So they'll make sure that IC handles that. What happens when that button is pressed also, in addition to the package of information, is all the computers in Metro will give audible alarms, as well as they'll start flashing lights. So it's very hard to miss in Metro, and they'll get in contact with you and then with the IC as well. In addition to after you put out your Mayday, what's going to happen after is the IC will keep communicating with you and have you go through your grab lives procedures. So I'm sure we all learned it in the drill tower, but it's going to be grab lives is the acronym. So G stands for gauge. You want to check your gauge, see how much air left, see how much air you have left, and then also if you're low on air, you would communicate that to the rescue teams or the IC so that they know, okay, I'm going to bring her bottles of air so that she has enough to be rescued. Then you're going to check your radio. So either make sure you have it, make sure that you're doing your Mayday procedures, and if so, you also have your EAB pressed. And then you're going to want to activate your pass. So A stands for activate pass, which means you want to depress that red button on your SCBA and have that those lights and that audible volume help rescuers find you a little bit easier. B stands for control your breathing. So even though you're panicking and probably spiraling because you're in a life-threatening condition, control your breathing as best you can, which might save you air in order to be rescued. And then L stands for stay low. So all of the heat is going to be on top. So stay under that heat, stay low. I is illuminate. So use all your flashlights, turn on your flashlights, use your pass lights to help people identify you and find you a little bit better. And then you have V, which stands for volume. Create as much volume as possible. So Your pass will be emitting your full alarm, which will create volume. And then also, if you hear people yelling, yell out to them, maybe bang on walls if your energy permits you to. E stands for egress. So find an egress if you can, if you're not trapped. Do a right wall search, left wall search. If there's another room, possibly that's more tenable, you can break through a wall if your energy permits and climb through to that other room. Find your egress and just keep swinging. And then S is shield your airway. So that's last resort, you're gonna wanna shield your airway. So that's our grab life procedures. And then next we'll go over radio etiquette a little bit. So basically general rule is think before you speak. So in order to not just be on the radio for a long time, you can think before you speak, and each time you press the push to talk button, you have a limit of 60 seconds, and then 4 seconds before that 60-second limit, it will warn you that time is coming to an end. So make sure you think before you speak. Another thing that you should do when using the radio is state the call sign that you're trying to communicate with first, and then state who your call sign is. So, hey Metro, this is Top from truck 66. Basically is a general way of like, hey you, it's me. And then speak in a clear, calm voice always on the radio. Try not to use niceties like please or thank you or any cursing whatsoever. And then make sure you listen for your acknowledgement. If you don't receive an acknowledgement or a response, it's assumed that your transmission did not get out. And then also, in order to minimize any bad feedback, you can use that 4 to 5 clicks up method on the RSM. And then finally, we'll talk about how to replace the radio if you have damaged it or lost it. 2 similar procedures for damage versus lost, but a little bit different. So the first thing that you're gonna do if you have a damaged or lost radio is immediately notify your commander, your Captain 1 or your Captain 2, and just your supervisor in general. So everyone should know, and in that they will possibly put you out of service, and then they'll contact the battalion chief or the battalion office, and the battalion has a cache of extra loaner radios that they can loan out to you in the meantime while that radio gets replaced or repaired. So you'll get that new radio, and then what you'll have to do is call Metro Fire Dispatch, which is actually the number on this radio right here. You can call them, and then you have to let them know your 4-digit identifier on your new loaner radio so that they can program that into the position that you're assigned to on the apparatus. And then if you were to be in a situation like a Mayday, they would have that loaner radio programmed so that when you press that button, that information got sent. What you'll have to do after that is, once you have the loaner radio, you're good. But if you have ended up losing the radio, you'll also have to do 2 additional things. You'll have to submit a police report, and they'll take down your information and describe the story of how you lost it or where they could possibly find it. And then you'll also have to complete an F-225 that will go through channels to the chief on a brief narrative of how you lost it and what happened to it. So those are the 2 kind of replacement procedures and differences. And with that being said, that concludes my radio drill on the Motorola 8000 APX HXE. With that, I can now take any further questions that you have.